Hi everyone, my name is Christos. I'm a developer. I work as a consultant, so I do everything from back-end SQL stuff all the way down to mobile apps. So I've worked on a few projects for companies, so I haven't really published my own using Xamarin, but I've done a lot of enterprise work for companies, and that's what got me initially involved with Xamarin. Einstein once said, if you want to succeed, you need to know the rules of the game, and then you need to play better than everybody else. So if you want to succeed in a field where everything is level and competition is very hard and things are very difficult for developers, then Xamarin actually can offer you the tools to do that in a very efficient way. So can I just get a show of hands on how many .NET developers we have in the house? Java developers? Well, it's .NET group anyway, but sometimes we have to. So what is Xamarin? Xamarin is a better way to build, test, and monitor your applications. It's a framework that allows you to create native applications for iOS, Android, Mac, and the Windows ecosystem, of course, using the power of Visual Studio and C#. So mobile development approaches. Most of you probably have a smartphone, it's either an Android, an iOS, or a Windows phone. You know that they're totally different platforms, right? So if you are going to develop for them, you have 3 different platforms to tackle. So how do you go about that? First approach is to use the silo approach, which is you have 3 different environments. You got iOS with Objective and Xcode, Objective-C and Xcode. You got Java with Eclipse, and you got C# and Visual Studio. These are 3 different environments. So companies that want to use that approach, they have to have multiple things or multiple specialized teams that can work on every platform. You got all different code bases. You can't really share things between each other. And then of course you got different toolsets, so different IDEs, making things quite hard. That means that even though you create native apps, which is the ideal because performance is fantastic, you have a problem with the cost, because the cost is quite high. You have to maintain all that, you have to have the specialists to work on the stuff, you have the knowledge for your developers, in your training, things change, SDKs change almost once a year, so I have to follow up. And then you also have the fact that iterations are quite harder, because you need to, you do a change on one of the platforms and you need to follow up on the other 3, and the fact that it's all fragmented is quite hard. The next approach is to use HTML. So you can do HTML5, CSS, JavaScript. You develop all the phones can have a web browser, so that can be a new solution. The problem with that is that you need to use the lowest common denominator. So you can't really develop full stack and be quite happy with that. Browser fragmentation, its platform has its own implementation of the web engine, so things that work on one or perform well on one will work well on the others. JavaScript engines are different as well. And then you have the benefit of developing on one platform, so iterations are quite faster, which is quite nice. But you can't monetize from that, so you can't really sell apps through the App Store, so you can't make money. It's quite a good solution for companies or enterprise level applications where you want to quickly have lots of apps internal for the internet, and then that was okay because companies don't really look to monetize, so that's a new solution. Then you have Xamarin approach, where you actually end up with the following stack. You got shared C# code base, which is fantastic. You can write all your business logic, file interactions, databases, API calls, cloud interactions on C#. And then you have the iOS specific UI coding, right? So the front end stuff, which is a thinner layer, because it's very specific. You got the Android C# UI, again, that's like you dealing with C#. And then you got Windows C# UI, which targets the Windows ecosystem. The good thing with that is that you get native performance. So again, you don't have that problem with HTML or hybrid apps. You get shared code, so one code base, and you can target all 3 platforms. And of course, you can use the power of C# and .NET framework, and of course, you get full API coverage. So whatever you can do with the native APIs for iOS in Objective-C, you can do them in C#. And we'll see how that that happens as we go through. Now, this is the traditional one. So up until this point, you had to create your own zip file, or you had to create your own XML file, you had to create your own XAML implementation in the front end. And that worked okay because you still had that sort of code base. You could use MVVM frameworks on top of that, so you could do a lot of MVVM models and make it a bit easier to do stuff and test things. But what if there was a better way to do it, right? So can we get any better than that? So Xamarin came up this year with Xamarin Forms. So what that does is actually adds another layer on top of the backend circle. You get a UI that is very uniform across all the platforms. So you write once, so you only have one file that defines your front-end UX, and then you only have a very thin layer, very specific application-specific code on this platform. So you still need an iOS project, you still need an Android project, and you still need a Windows project within your solution. But they're only there to compile, and they're only there to actually kickstart your whole process, because there's an entry point for each app, and then that's what's required. So that very thin layer at the top is the one that you require to have in your solution. You don't even need to touch it if you don't want to. So if you're quite happy working with forms, that we will see further on, you see that there's no need to inject any specific platform-specific code. But if you need to, and if you want to tailor that, there's nothing stopping you. So you can combine Xamarin Forms with the older approach and the more classical approach. So you might ask yourselves why should we use C#? And the truth is that the last couple of iterations of Xamarin have added support for VB.NET. I don't know why, they did. So that's still supported. And they also added support for F#, which is the functional equivalent of C#, which means that if you like to write functional code, you can still use it with Xamarin. And that's another thing. Now, C#, right? C# is awesome because of lots of reasons. First of all, you got link support. Not many languages support that. I mean, Java guys still linking people what? Which is quite good because you can have lots of collections. You can have a SQLite database at the back end that you can use a link to SQLite SDK to work with it. In effect, makes working with collections and data sets very easy, as you probably know. We have excellent support for XML documents and XML and JSON. They're all built into .NET, so we all know how easy it is to interact with them and parse and go there. And then you also have the fantastic event handling and delegates that you get from people that have worked with Windows Forms and people that have worked with web forms that will know that you can click a button, you get an event, and then you work with that, and then you can extend out the delegates. Let's see an example. It's probably a bit, the resolution is probably not too good on that. But on the left-hand side, you got Objective-C. So all that does is actually define an object, a custom object. Right? So you can see how many lines you can define for that. And only takes 3 lines here to 5 lines to define a C#. So I don't know if you have any experience with Objective-C, but it makes things a bit more complicated, and you can have a little bit of bloated code just to define simple structure. Right? Also, you can get, as I was saying before, you get amazing support for awaited async. That was added recently with the Xamarin guys just of 2014. So things that you can do with .NET 4.5, you can also be transferred into your Xamarin projects. That means that you can provide a very fluid UI, so you don't get blockers by using async. You can achieve the same with Objective-C, but they rely on callbacks, so that has been more complicated when you work with these things. And I think JavaScript is also, Java in Android is equally as complicated. So the difference with Android, again, the resolution is a bit too low, but you can see that the code is a bit harder to read with regards to creating just a item click. So if you have a list view and you select one item, when you click on it, the column on the left does that, and then the code on the right is quite a bit more simple. But what you can also do is you can add async await, and then if you can even more fluid and more responsive when you work with objects on your view. Also, C# runs on a large number of devices. There are almost 2.5 billion devices running C#, and that can be extended. You can add F# and you can add VB.NET. So there you go. So how does Xamarin work? The guys at Xamarin started really early in 2000. They took the Mono repo, which was the open source .NET framework, and started working with that, trying to make it do the things that they want to do. So eventually they owned most of the Mono development, and then they came up with Mono Touch, which was the early precursor of what we have now. And the idea was that as soon as the iOS stuff started coming out, they thought there might be a good way to create bindings between the iOS SDKs and the Mono. So what they came up with was a solution where you get your usual stuff that you get from .NET, so you get full network framework support. System.NET, System.io, System.link, and System.xml. You get System.security if you want to do encryption stuff or things like that. So there's a great variety. I think almost about 70% of the .NET framework can be used with Xamarin. So there are things that are very specific to like System with web, which doesn't really translate to with web, but anything that can be used on the phone has been added. And then what they do, say for the Windows Phone, we have the Windows API specific stuff, so that by creating one project, you can speak to all of these, you can use all of these APIs. So the top half is the device specific stuff. Like we also have all the WinRT in there, which is slightly limited. But with one project, you can speak to all these APIs and you can develop against all these things. For the iOS stuff, we have the bottom half remains the same, along with all the 70% of the .NET framework. And then you have all the UI kit, which is the main component of what you use for the iOS development. And you get the map kit and core graphics. You get everything you can do with the iOS SDK. So you get accelerometer, you get cameras, you get access to all the hardware and sensors on the machine, all through .NET. And that's the beauty of it. So you don't really have to know anything about it because everything has been abstracted for you and documented. So fairly easy to start working with that. And same for the Android. There are specific platform APIs, but you can see that everything has been mapped for you, so it makes your life a lot easier. And then you can see that the bottom half remains the same, so it's the same across the board. So anything you can do in Objective-C, Swift, and Java can be done with C# and Visual Studio. And one thing that came out 2 weeks ago is that there's a compiler now for Visual Studio that allows you to write Swift and compile to all the other platforms. So there are other options out there if you're looking, but if you primarily write in .NET and like write in C# or VB.NET, then there's no point of learning another language, and that's the benefit of it. There's no knowledge transfer to or knowledge acquisition in the process. So what happens when you run the application and you compile, the Xamarin will actually go and do an ahead of time compilation for the phone. So it creates the files that need to be created to run and deploy the application. And then for the Android stuff, you will just use the just-in-time compiler, which is part of the SDK on the phone. So you actually compile everything on the phone, so you don't need a device or anything else. Now, Xamarin has always been up to date. The time is on the day that they announced the new iOS SDK or the new Java SDK, they will have the mapping ready for you. I think they have some kind of a deal with Apple. I think they work with Xamarin quite closely. But their target is that. So last year in September, when they announced the new iOS 8 stuff, these guys by the evening had already released their first SDK that will support that. And on top of that, they also do provide support for all the peripherals. So you also have support for the Google Glass, although that has been retired now. I think there's going to be a second generation. The point is that these guys are on top of the game, and they do try really hard to provide you up-to-date information. So if you're looking to upgrade your application to the new iOS or the new Android version, then straight away you can just do that. Code setting. Now there's different techniques to do that. In the old scenario where you had the the separate UI elements in the shared code base. There was an option to go beyond, say, 60% by using MVVM frameworks like MVVM Lite and MVVM Cross, and that was quite an easy way to get all the way up to 75%. But you still have to write all the UI specific stuff on the plugin platform. Now with the Xamarin Forms, you can almost reach up to a 90% coverage. Now it's no coincidence that Windows 7 and Windows NT have the best coverage over here. But there's nothing stopping you from releasing one simple app that doesn't really do much in terms of functionality. For example, if it's not a game, in that case, if it's just a text-based application, you can easily write code that doesn't involve any UI-specific stuff for the target platform. So in that case, you can almost say you can get 100% coverage without doing anything. And once you start getting things a bit more complicated, and these guys, iCircuit, which is an application that helps you track your performance when you run and when you cycle, they manage an average of 90% coverage. Sorry, an average of about 85%, which is pretty good considering the fact that you write once and then you develop, you run everywhere. So, there are different options to create that functionality. At the moment, there are three ways to do that. The first way is to use the Xamarin Forms portable library, which allows you to write stuff across so that you have one project which has all your UI code, and when you run, or you execute on the phone, you compile that project to your Windows Phone application, and that goes with it, and same for the iOS. You have the option to have a shared project, where you need to use conditional if statements. So if it's Windows Phone, then do that. If it's iOS, do this, which makes things a bit more muddled. But if you already have that as part of your migration from the previous setup, then that works quite nicely. And then you have portable class libraries, which are it's mainly a .NET and not a Xamarin specific library where you put your code there, and then that has to be shared. The problem with that is that you need to use the lowest common denominator. So if you target all the frameworks, so Android, Windows Phone, and iOS, and say Mac, if you want to do that, because you can use Xamarin for that, then in that case, there's a set of libraries that can be implemented, and there's also a set of libraries that won't work across the board, and that's the problem. If you want to do complicated stuff, then PCLs don't really cover that. NuGet. Now, Xamarin worked quite hard at work to get support for third-party components and DLL. So anything that you can do in Visual Studio with NuGet, you can almost transfer to the application that you're writing. So any package like JSON.NET, and any XML libraries you want, any like one of the things that was quite big was in the DCL stuff that was out recently, and that came down as a NuGet package, and that gives you a whole list of things that you don't really have to implement yourself when you write stuff, and that's a big help and speeds the process up. Shared projects, I'll talk about that briefly. So the idea is that you can have either a portable class library, Forms portable class library, which includes all the UI. You can have a shared project where you use conditional if statements, and then you can have the TCL, which is a simple one. Development environments, there are two ways to develop for Xamarin. So if you're on a Windows ecosystem, you can use your Visual Studio. You don't have to change anything. That takes advantage of all the tools that you might have, like debugging tools, ReSharper, any third-party add-ons that you work on your day-to-day basis, they can all just be used for Xamarin. So it's fully supported, which is quite nice. There are unit tests as well, so you can have your unit tests as part of the mobile application solution. Now, if you don't want to do that, which might be, I don't know. Right now, there's no really good reason to not use that because it's a community edition of Visual Studio, so you don't really have to pay anything. In the past, the Express versions were not supported, so you couldn't really do that. Now, with the full version of Visual Studio being released as a community edition, you can do anything. And it supports everything from Visual Studio 2010 all the way up to 2015. And even though 2015 is not really out, it's still supported, so you can actually start working on that if you are really adventurous. The other way is to use Xamarin Studio, which comes free with your account. So if you're on a Mac or on the Windows machine, you can use Xamarin Studio. It's a bit more simplified. It's a simplified version of Visual Studio. It's still quite powerful though, so there's no limitation there. Limitations on what you can do. The IDE is slightly different, as I can show you how that looks like. And you still get the package support, so you can still pull things up, but you don't get tools like, say, Xamarin. They do have built-in support for repos, so if you have a GitHub or Subversion, they support both. Visual Studio integration, as we saw. Also, one thing I didn't mention before for the Xamarin Studio is you get one benefit from that is that they have their own designers. So when you develop for Visual Studio, you don't really have a designer to see how the application looks like. So you have to run it and see what it looks like in the end. Whereas with the Xamarin Studio, you do get a designer, so you can drag and drop stuff, and then you make it a bit more visual. So it takes a little bit more time a little less time to reach your final UI look. So Visual Studio integration. So fully supported iOS, Android, Windows Phone, Windows Store on the platform, and then you get Xamarin Foundation and cover if you're doing code coverage. So also when you install Xamarin Studio, installs a number of toolbars for your IDE, and that makes it a bit more easier to check the logs, start the machines, and choose the emulator if you're working against an emulator. You don't really need to own the device that you're testing against. You can still use all the emulators that come with the installation. Xamarin Studio, again, it's advertised as being optimized for cross-platform development, and it truly is a cross-platform development IDE. It provides the ability to start digging into the SDKs and seeing what they have to offer and what kind of implementations they provide. World-class Android and iOS designers, and that's really true because if you ever had to use the iOS designer in Xcode, it's absolutely appalling, and it's very cramped. Lots of toolbars, and it makes it really, really hard to work with. And the Android designers were also equally as bad. I don't know why they've done it, but it's quite crippling when you have to work with these tools. Whereas they have some really good designers of the Xamarin Studio, which is one of the benefits that I like to jump from one machine to another when I do the development. It makes it a bit easier when you do the UI stuff. And powerful debugging simulator on device. Again, on both IDEs, you can connect either your device if you've got an iOS phone, or you can connect your emulators. The benefit with the emulators is, although they're a bit slower, you can see at least how it looks like from iOS 5 or all the way to iOS 8. Or so you don't have to physically open device. Again, really good designers. You can drag and drop stuff. You can target multiple devices as well, so they have a whole host of layouts they can use. I think they did say there's almost about 2,000 different device setups that you can actually have to test against when you develop for Android, so that's a little challenge. Now, the designer over here is the one that we use not for Windows, not for the forms, but for the standard development. So when you do XID files, then you can get a designer to do the work for you. Again, it's a lot more performant than you were working if you were working with Xcode. So it speaks for itself, and especially if you run it and use the difference in the performance. Yeah, that's true. You can build apps a lot faster. And what they've also done is there's a component store where third-party companies can go and drop stuff. You get a lot of functionality there that's not really built in, so you don't have to recreate yourself. So, for example, they released a Dropbox support. So if you want to integrate Dropbox backup or Dropbox interaction with the user's files, you don't really have to go and create your own SDK or your own library to do that. It's already built in. There's a whole variety of tools that you can use. There's an Azure backend as well, so if you want to use Azure Web Services, you can go and just use that. You don't really have to write your own code. It makes working with the platform a lot faster. Trust me, because in the early days you had to roll out your own stuff, and it was quite hard. There's a lot of free stuff and there's a lot of paid for stuff. So depending on your budget, you can see how you can improve. And there's a lot of stuff on GitHub as well that work nicely with Xamarin. Also, what we also get is controls. So there are companies out there that have already extended the controls for Windows, for Xamarin Forms. So you can Telerik and DevExpress, they all provide a set of tools for you. So it's quite nice if you want to go outside the standard buttons, the standard charts and all that. Right, Xamarin Android player. So when you use the emulator, which comes with the Java SDK, it takes about 10 minutes to boot up, even on a very, very fast machine. My Mac has 16 GB of RAM and it's a Core i7, and it still takes 10 minutes just to load the SDK and start things up. The Android emulator, the Android player, which in effect is an emulator, works both on Mac and PC. It can run fine on with Hyper-V. Some emulators really have problems with that, but Hyper-V is quite nice. So these guys develop their own emulator, and it's much faster. So at the moment, they support all the way up to 4.4.2. There's going to be an Android 5 coming out soon, but the benefits are very lightweight and very fast. So when you test and you don't have an Android device next to you, you can use the emulator to do things. As you progress, it's advisable actually to start using devices because you need to test actual performance. Now, what's included when you get the Xamarin Studio installed? You automatically get about 40 plus pages, layouts, and controls that you can use. You get built-in code behind. You can do either code behind, so you can develop your whole UI using C#, or you can use XAML. At the moment, you can combine both. You're going to get a XAML.cs file, but you can have half and half. So you either define all your UI in one place or the other. I think they're working on improving that because it's almost like a hindrance. Now, the XAML that you use for Windows for Xamarin Forms is not the XAML that we use for WPF, or the XAML that you use for Silverlight, or the XAML that you use for Windows Phone and Windows RT. It's a Xamarin-specific subset of XAML, but people that have worked with XAML will probably find it quite easy to interact with, but you don't get that full support that you get from Microsoft. Things are progressing with .NET 4 coming out, and with the new stack of XAML being optimized. I think Xamarin are working to find a way to bring all that together. And also we have the core .NET being released as an open source. I think at some point Miguel de Casa, who is one of the founders of the Xamarin platform, and he did say that although it's early days, they are working on a way to find a middle ground between the current stack, which is based primarily on the monotask, but it's not really supported by Microsoft or enhanced in the community and open source .NET Core. So going forward, we'll see a lot of improvement in the way that we write XAML, in the way that we write C# within Visual Studio or outside Visual Studio. There's two-way binding. Again, we spoke about that. MVVM, anyone that has worked with MVVM frameworks will find that quite beneficial. So when you create your forms, you can have a two-way binding. So if something changes in the UI, it's automatically reflecting the code. So you don't have to write events to handle things that happen in your UI. There's built-in navigation as well. So although most of the platform-specific code comes with a navigation solution or a navigation service that will help you to load pages and unload pages as you move through the application, the fact that they've added their own layer means that it's very easy to pop pages in and so you can load pages in and pop pages out as you go back and forth. So navigation is quite simplified as well. And you get animation APIs on top of everything else. So if you want to add your own animation, as with XAML, you'll know that it's one of the big benefits is the fact that you can use animation. Is anybody not aware with what XAML is? Anybody not worked with XAML before? No? Dependency service. So on top of everything else, one of the biggest benefits that you can get from working with the Xamarin Form framework is the fact that you can abstract everything using interfaces, and you can have everything on your shared project, on your Forms BCL, calling into interfaces, and then what happens is on the code, on the platform-specific code, you do your dependency resolution. So if you want to interact with the file system, for example, on your phone, the Windows phone is totally different to the iOS and the Android, but using that means that you don't really have to worry about it and everything is built in. And you also get messaging, so you can have messages from one screen to another, or different parts of the application being sent through the Xamarin framework. And on top of that, if you want, you can also throw an MVVM framework. So if you can throw an MVVM Lite and work with Xamarin Forms. So that makes, as I said, the coverage that you can get almost up to 90% of code saving. Now, one of the pinnacles of working with Windows Phone, I don't know if you've ever developed for Windows Phone or WPF, is the fact that you get some really nice ways to organize your controls within the form or within the page. And that was one of the things that were lacking in Android. So in Android, you just drop them and you have to specifically say using different XML files where the controls are going to sit. Whereas now you get a little bit more abstraction on top of that. So what you get at the top is the content page, which is the one that contains all your content. And then you get master detail page, navigation. So if you want to have the back button that you get on your nice Android apps, then you can get that as part of the built-in controls. You get tab and carousel. Now you might ask, there's not really a tab solution in Windows phones. So how does that translate? The idea is that the Xamarin Forms translate to the underlying underlying OS implementation. And that means that if you have a button that you define in Xamarin Forms, then when you render it in iOS, it will look like a native. It will actually be a native button. It won't look like a native button. It will be a native button. In Android, it will be also a native button. In Windows Phone, it will be a native button. So for the tab option, for example, what you get is for the Windows, for the iOS, you get the two options. So if you have two tabs, for example, you have two options at the bottom, which look like a button. On the Android, you get the top one where the tabs tend to reside. And on the Windows Phone, you get the panorama, so you have the different page views that you get. So the two views, you just scroll to the right, and then you have the other one. So that translates to the native implementation, and you don't have to worry about that, which is the biggest benefit. Now, on top of the content pages, you also get the organization of your controls. So you can get stack, which is fantastic. You drop your controls in the stack, and then you say, I want a spacing of 20 points, and then that will translate automatically to the underlying solution. So you can get a nice stack view. You can have horizontal stacks and vertical stacks and so on. You can have absolute positioning on your views, relative. So depending on your screens, if you want to have a fluid design, you can have a relative control to put them in. You can have a grid, which almost emulates what you have on the Windows Phone, but it's quite nice to translate that to the underlying iOS. Scroll view, which is quite big. You can have big lists and you don't display them, then automatically just drop them there, and then they'll take care of the scrolling up and down. And a frame, if you want to have a sub control with that. Now, one of the benefits is you can have stacked controls. You can have, say, you can start with a stack, and you can say, I want an absolute view within my stack view, and then you can say, you know what, I want also scroll view within my, it's complicated, but it's a scenario that you might, want to explore for your implementation. Now remember, you're not only targeting phones, you're also targeting tablets, and you can also target macOS implementation. So all these work across the board. And then on top, at the bottom, you have all the individual controls. So activity indicator, if you ever try to open a page or something that takes a bit longer, you'll get the spinner or the nice line that goes across on the Windows Phone. And you don't have to worry about how that gets implemented. Just drop it on your view, and that works automatically. Right, so that's a very small example. So we'll run a demo later on to see how that renders, but the idea is that you write once and then it runs natively for the underlying OS. A single API can generate everything natively. Extensibility, there's nothing stopping you from taking the controls and embedding them into your custom implementation if you want to. So you can extend stuff. There's nothing. Everything can be extended. So you can derive from one controller and then make it do something funky. But the idea is that you don't really need to have a mind frame. Oh, I'm actually using Windows Xamarin Forms now, so I can't go anywhere with that. You have the option to start with Xamarin Forms, and then if you see something that doesn't really fit nicely, or performance is not as good, or you need to do something that's not really supported at the moment, then you can also fall back and extend your UI by using the native support. And if that doesn't even work, so if you can use XML or XAML to implement the UI specific stuff, you can also create bindings to the old, to the actual Android SDK or the iOS SDK, and those bindings will give you the functionality that's lacking. So it's an extensible framework. You're not tied to that. So I think now, next we have a demo. Any questions so far that you guys might have before I do the demo? Everyone's speechless.
I've got a question.
Yes, go on.
What's the licensing terms?
I'll get into that in a moment, but if you want to cover that now, there are 4 tiers on the Xamarin platform. There's the free solution. So what you get with that is the Xamarin Studio, and you get all the API support, all the SDKs that you need to start developing on the environment, but you don't get the forms. So you can still develop with the old platform, so you have the cell chunk at the bottom, and then you have to write your specific UI code. Still using C# though, you just need to implement on a specific project. Then you have the indie solution, we used to call it, which is the entry level. So that's $25, which equates to about 4 coffees in the UK, or 3 coffees, depending on how you get your coffee. So it's about £12 technically. And what you get with that is you get the forms. So with £12 a month, you can start developing, and you can have full support across the board, and you have native applications running on all 4 environments. Then there is and now you can pay monthly, so that's quite nice. You don't have to pay in advance, like £400 if you need to. So it's like £244. And then you have the enterprise one, which is the one that most people use, and it's the most popular one, which is about $85 and per month. That equates to about £45. But the problem with that is that you have to pay in advance. But they're quite good in working out. So you can get 30 days of full demo. So you get a professional solution for a whole month, and then you can tailor it down to see, or you can develop your application in 30 days and then just release, and then you don't have to pay for anything. And then you have your professional, which is about 14 or 1600, and that gives you 1-day support or phone calls if you have any problems, or full support across the board. So it ticks all the boxes. If you go to the Xamarin site, you'll see the price of all that's what I said. I can't remember about the professional because it's too expensive for me. Go on.
You can't actually use the indie license for Visual Studio?
No, you can't. No. But it gives you the Xamarin forms, so it's still.
But the trial is the business, isn't it?
The trial is the business. That's right. Yeah. Another way to get into a free license is to do an open source project that actually targets Xamarin. So if you create a component for them and you contact them, then they're quite okay to give you an open source license, which means you can develop stuff for yourself as well, as long as you fully support and publish on the component side. So that's another solution. Right.
One question, sorry to keep interrupting you.
No, that's fine, that's fine.
Is it possible to use Visual Studio and Xamarin Studio on the same code base, or do they interfere with one another?
No, it's absolutely fine. Yeah, so if you get one developer working with Xamarin Studio and another on Visual Studio, the solutions are exactly the same. There's only one caveat. On the Xamarin Studio within the Mac, you can see the project, but you can't edit anything for the Windows stuff. You can see the Android and iOS, you can design for them, but you can't really. And you can see the shared project. So your forms will still work in iOS, sorry, in Mac, on the Mac, so Xamarin Studio, but you can't see the Windows stuff. So you have to go back to the Windows one too. So the Windows application. So when you, in order to create a new solution, you have to go new. So now I've installed everything. So now everything is built into my solution. So you can see under Visual C#, there's still the individual stuff I was telling you about. So you can create your views individually based on what you want to do, if you want to do that. So you get the Android, you got the iOS, they still have the classic API which supports the old stuff, and there's the new integrated framework which supports both 32 and 64, although I think 32 bits has been dropped. You can still create iPad specific UX stuff. And then you go into the mobile apps. So this is the one we're talking about. You got the blank app, so that's your starter app, which is a Xamarin Forms portable, which contains your, at the top you have your Xamarin Forms, and then you have, which is a portable class, and then everything else underneath iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. You got the blank app, which is a portable, it's a shared one, where you use your if statements, and then you have a PCL, which actually doesn't really give you any forms functionality, but you can put your shared code in there if you need to share it. Once you click on create, I'm not going to test that now because it needs to download certain stuff from Wikit and it takes a bit of time. So I've already prepared one, which is a blank one. So what you get now is, can everybody see it at the back? Do you want to zoom in? What you get is, you got at the top you have the My Demo, which is the portable. That's where all your shell code goes. You got the My Demo Android, My Demo iOS, and at the bottom there is the Windows one. So all the projects created for you automatically. You don't have to do anything. And then every application has its own entry point. I don't know if you work with Android or iOS, so or Windows. So for the Windows phone, for example, there's an app XAML. That's your entry point for the application where the logic of the bootstrap takes place. In the iOS, you get in the Android, you get the main activity. Again, the same thing, bootstraps your application. And for the iOS, you get your app delegate, right? So you don't have to worry about them. You don't have to do any logic in there because, as you see, the shared code comes with a nice app.cs, and that targets all three frameworks. So any code that you put in there will get bootstrapped as part of your build solution. So as you can see here, there's a main page, which is our starting point, and then we have a content, and in that content we put a stack layout. And within that stack layout, we have one label. So if we change that to say, what's with the captions? Aberdeen, save that. So for the, we'll do an iOS first. So we'll choose, say, iOS iPhone 5, iOS 8. I don't have a phone with me, and that wouldn't work anyway. So what happens now is the only caveat to do iOS stuff is that you need a Mac, right? Everything else can be done on your Windows machine and it will work absolutely fine. But for your iOS stuff, you need to get a Mac. And the Mac in this case, all it does is that there's a linker between the two machines, and that says, I'm building for iOS. Just go into the Mac, build it over there. So you need Xcode for that to work, right? So it compiles that. And then what happens is you get, there you go. So it brings up a nice emulator and then it displays your content. So for you to work on the iOS stuff, unfortunately, on the Mac OS stuff.
So can we see the climbers climbing up the face of El Capitan?
So in order for you to develop for the iOS and iPad and Mac OS, you need a laptop. There are different solutions to set up. Some people like to work on the MacBook Pro. They create a VM, so they run their Windows within the VM, and then they create that linkage, so you don't have to have two different devices. The other option is to buy a cheap second-hand Mac Mini Pro, because technically your Mac is not going to be doing any heavy lifting other than just compiling the stuff. So you can get a 4 or 5 year old from eBay for about 80, 100, 120 quid, and that will do the job for you. So you don't have to spend too much money in getting that set up. But you need the two. For everything else, you don't need to. So that's running on the iOS. Let's stop that and change it to. To run on the Android. So what we're going to do is we'll do to change the. Unfortunately, you cannot all three at the same time, which would be nice. Just click once and then you can see all three at the same time. But unfortunately, that's not how it works. So you need to focus on one at a time. So by setting up the Android solution as a startup. Now, remember how we discussed about the nice Xamarin player? This is the version that you get here. What you actually get is this is the Android player manager. So this is where the images go for your application. I'll try to do that. I don't know if it's going to work. So this is where they put all the images. So Android 4.5, sorry, 5 will probably come out at some point here.
We're still in some thanks.
Oh, I'm sorry, guys. Right. Okay, so this is your Xamarin Android player manager. So you get the images here. Usually there's about 7 of them all stacked up, so you can target all the way down to 4.1, I think. But they have different resolutions, so you can at least see how things work. And I think they're working on a way to get more images from the community to be added here, so you don't really rely on them publishing stuff. And you just have to press play. And what that does, it actually uses what's it called? It's a VirtualBox. So you use VirtualBox to run and actually emulate a VM for your Android. So technically, it's a VM running without data within your solution. And the good thing is that it doesn't really interfere with Hyper-V. That's a big problem for Windows 8 devices. I don't know if you're aware of that. So this is your player over here. So we'll choose to run it on KitKat. At that point, you'll see there's a process of publishing stuff and packaging everything for you. You see the reference to Mono over here. So they still rely on Mono, as I said, but they are working on getting the .NET core integrated to the solution. Now, unfortunately, Android is quite a bit slower, but you can imagine, as I said, it takes about 7 to 10 minutes to publish to the old Android emulator, so that's a big step forward. So again, we get that one, and if we run against the phone, much faster now. Again, you can choose emulators or you can choose your own device, and you get all the tooling at the top as well. Helps you with things like managing the Android SDKs, deploying nice plus, that's you. It wouldn't be much of a demo if we didn't really write some code, so let's go and create a nice page. So this is a very simplified solution. You get everything in the name, so that doesn't really matter nice about the So we'll add one page here. Again, as I said, anything I have to do with your UI can be added into one place, and then it will work for all target devices without you having to do any heavy lifting. So in this case, we do forms. Of course I trust you. Why shouldn't I trust you? So again, what we do here is we add one label that has main text, and that's a binding. So remember how we discussed about two-way binding. I'll show you how that's implemented. And we'll just say again, hello. Okay. So if we run this page now, you'll only get one of the two because there's no binding at the moment. Okay. So expected. Right. So what we say over here is we call it CS. So what we say here is when the application starts running, we just want to display the hello page, and you can put anything you want in there. So let's run that and see what happens. So obviously we haven't really binded anything, and we haven't really provided a stack layout or anything, so just that's what comes out if you don't put anything in there. So let's go and put some binding. So this should be something that's very polytypal. So we do that. So debugging. This. I know my class should go into a different file, but that's fine. We'll disregard that for now. I promise I'm more careful with it. So what we did here is we said we create a nice small object called my model that is only a main tag. And when we go back into our page, the hello page, we say I want to add a binding to my whole page, so the whole page will get that model, and I want that my model with main text black to be forms for win. And when you run it, okay, we should see two lines of two pages, 2 lines of code, and force of the win at the top. You can see. So that's a very simple way, a very simplistic way to say, right, we can do binding. And then, as I said, the idea is that you can create some really complex models and then bind them to your view, and then automatically you have that nice back and forth. One last thing, we'll just view how to write pop-up window using async. Just create another. I'll run that on all three. Emulators just to see how it looks. So I'll let the page here. So I'm not going to add anything here, so I'm going to remove that one, even though it will be black anyway. This time I'll add the code in the back. So you see how you can do it in Xamarin, you can see how you can do it in the code behind. So here. So what we're going to do is we're going to display it's going to be a button, and when you click it will say display alert yes or no, and when you click that back it will, so when you click on that it will display an alert saying have you found so far, yes, no, and you say yes. Right. So, we just need to change our endpoint to use the pop-up page rather than the hello page. So this time I'll go for, let's do the, I'll start with the Windows and then we'll move on to the other two platforms. application. Right, so you can see that this is the built-in Windows pattern. Nothing really funky about it. You can style it, you can customize it as much as you want. And then you get the classic Windows pop-up where it says having fun, yes or no. And you can see that everything is exactly the same as you would expect them on a native app. Right? And we didn't write anything that was just targeting Windows specific stuff. So if we move on to we go into our Android version, and Nexus, and see what we get. Okay, so that's the native button again for Android, and then you get your native pop-up. Nothing code, we didn't say anything in the code about target Android or anything else, so everything is nice and fine. And then let's try the iOS stuff. Again, change your target. So to iOS. Do that. And we'll change the okay. So what you do is you have running iOS build host. So that's a service running on your iOS, and then what happens is you pair up by using the pair button, and when you do that, you get a specific code, makes it a bit more secure, and then with Visual Studio, you just enter it somewhere and it runs nicely. So there's no errors. It's very good. Okay. So very ugly app, but still working. And again, native pop-up. And you can go over there. The sky is the limit on how much you can do. So, that's me.